Okay, so I'm going to talk about games from today and or yesterday from Tata Steel. This is from today. Magnus had the black pieces against Fabi. They played a Rui Lopez or a Spanish, depending on what you call it. And I was saying that in the last 10 years, if two players over 2,700 are playing, and you see this position, it's usually a Berlin. However, in this tournament, people are playing A6, which is the way they used to play. Okay, and he played a closed Rui, which we saw in several games so far, Castles, I guess. And as I was explaining 2 days ago when I did commentary on the games, Black wants to play D5, the Marshall Gambit. And the game that I was looking at the time, White played A4, and Black played B4, and White played A5. And that was played in this game. So 2 days ago, this was also played by other players. Who those players were, I don't know. Okay, now I remember who they were. It was Wesley So versus who? What's his name? Keimer. Yeah, however you pronounce it. I've heard both. And Vincent played rook here, and took this eventually. Mm-hmm. And Wesley eventually won. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then Magnus played D6. Solid. C3. Rook B8. H3, stopping bishop G4, so you can play D4. H6. D4. Normally in the Rui Lopez, when you play C3 and D4, which White usually tries to do, then we want to preface that with H3 because the D pawn needs some defending and bishop G4 pins the knight. So that makes it a little awkward. So playing H3 first and then C3 D4 is quite a common idea. And he took on C3, so his rook is really good. Now the queen is, defending two different things, two different ways. B takes C3. I think you can't play knight takes C3 because you can't, these aren't defended sufficiently. So you have to either take on C3 or take here, and take here is bad because this takes this. So this is forced. Then he took. Now, the first of all, I'm reasonably sure, and by reasonably sure, I'm absolutely sure, that this is Fabi's preparation. And one way you can tell that, it's pretty early in the game. But more importantly, Fabi has 5 minutes more than he started with. So he's not playing fast, he's playing his prep. So if I'd never seen this position before, I would probably play C takes D. But the engine does prefer knight takes. And I'm sure that's his prep and that's theory, and he still has more time than he started with. Okay, and in this position, and in fact, Svidler and Howell were saying they thought Black could easily play knight takes knight, pawn takes, and then D5. And then if E5, we have knight E4. And they thought Black was fine here. And the engine says Black is fine here. So nice knight on E4. And so they expected that. Magnus played bishop to D7, which is also okay. And this indicates he doesn't want to take this. He wants to put his knight on E5 because the knight's good on E5. So he just defended his knight, and he didn't, yeah. Now, if we play knight E5 right away, I think that fails tactically, unless I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. So if I'm wrong, the engine is going to tell me I'm wrong. Mm. I think you play F4, and then when the knight moves, I have knight C6. And for some reason, the engine says I'm right. So if you want to play knight E5, you have to play bishop D7 first. Okay. And let me see how long he took on this move. Okay, he thought 7 minutes on bishop F4, so he's out of his prep. And bishop F4 is the engine move. And then he did put the knight on E5. And Fabi completed developing his minor pieces with knight A3, which is not a favorite move of the engine, but it's fine. Doesn't lose or anything. Okay, rook e8 is a good move, getting the rook to the half open file. The bishop's going to come back to f8. Always play bishop f8. Bishop g3 is the engine move. Always play bishop f8, also the engine move. And now in this position, Fabi did something that he can't take back. He made what's called a big decision, and he changed the nature of the position. And in the end, that's why he lost, although this move does not lose. But the engine says this knight is good, and this knight is not good. So the engine wants to play knight c4 and trade off those knights. And then it says white has a teeny tiny advantage, like 0.1, 0.2. Okay, so basically equal. Instead, Fabi played super aggressive. Now, as you all know, they don't know. Yesterday, Fabi was fighting for a draw. Then his opponent went crazy, Maksudlu, and Fabi was winning. And then in a winning position, Fabi didn't win. And Magnus yesterday won after losing 2 in a row. He beat Richard Rapport. So the players were going the opposite ways. Fabi was doing well and he messed up. And Magnus started out in the middle of the tournament doing badly. Then he won his game against Rapport. So the fortunes are changing. And when you have the white pieces, especially when you're Fabi, you want to get an advantage and win the game. You don't want to play for equality. So he played very aggressive f4. Some would say too aggressive, although I wouldn't. It's still okay. Okay, he played knight c6. So the knight has been kicked off of its square, but the e4 pawn is weak. In fact, it's attacked. Okay, and now in this position, the engine says we should play bishop h4, pinning the knight. And then black can take this pawn over here, and it says the position's about equal. And instead, Fabi played a super aggressive move, probably not very good. Probably not. Mm-hmm. He played e5. And I assume that was his idea when he played f4. The problem is, if this doesn't work, your position's collapsing, because this is weak and isolated, this is weak and isolated, and this knight's off sides, this pawn's attacked a lot, and we're opening up our bishop when we play d takes e. And there's a word that Yasser likes to use in similar situations, and that word is touch. And touch means you're attacking a piece that's defended, so you're touching it. So like he would say touch, and then touch, and then touch, and then touch, and then after DE, this is a touch. And this is actually a threat that's hanging. So with so many loosey-goosey kind of white pieces and pawns, this is very risky. And so typically, when somebody as good as Fabi plays something so risky, it's because his analysis is immaculate. And then he does whatever he wants because he calculates all the variations forever. And I think in this particular situation, he did not calculate accurately. It was very tricky, and Magnus played like an engine, which he occasionally does. That's why if you're playing an engine, you don't play f4, e5, because you figure there's something wrong with it. But if you're playing a human, you're like f4, e5 would refute knight e5, knight c6, because black's just moving his knight back and forth, and white is advancing at the center. And there's very, very complicated tactics that I assume Fabiano missed. So he took on e5, he took back, and now black only has one mover he's lost. Okay, you can't play knight h7, although knight h7 is the safest, like my knight's attacked, it has nowhere else to go. But after knight h7, white's moving forward and black's moving back, and that's actually quite good. And white has a nice tactic here. White can play bishop takes f7 check, and then queen f3 check, and regain his piece. And obviously he won this pawn, and black's king is exposed. So black is forced to play knight takes d4 instead of moving his knight to h7. And in this position, we don't have time to take this knight because our bishop is to touch. Bishop's attacked and everything's attacked. So you have to take back. Now, which way should we take back? Well, if you take with the queen, you're not defending your bishop. And when I take your bishop, I'm also attacking your knight because my bishop's on f8. So you have to play CD. There's no other move. So you played CD. Okay, good. Okay, now Magnus played a move that heretofore only the engine saw. And when I say the engine saw it, Svidler and Howell were looking at something, and then somebody in the chat said, hey, Svidler and Howell, the engine says this move. And then they were like, oh, okay, Magnus will play that because he's Magnus. But they wouldn't play it because they didn't see it. And I'm assuming Fabi didn't see it because it looks insane. But Magnus did see it. Now, what they were analyzing, Svidler and Howell, was knight h5, with the idea that if you take the knight, I take the bishop on b3. Okay, so then they were analyzing bishop f7, king f7, queen h5, g6, and they thought that white was probably winning because white has an extra pawn. And even though black has two bishops, white's going to play like check and then play d5, and white has a big center and extra pawn. So they thought knight h5 wasn't good, so they thought maybe black had to play knight h7, and they preferred white's position. So this is a common mishap amongst the top players, is they play a bad line that loses, which is rare. And the reason they played the bad line that loses, which is in this case, is they didn't see one move. They saw every other move, and every other move they're doing great. So Fabi's doing great here, except he missed black's next move, which will shock everybody. Unless you've already seen the game, then it's easy.
I hadn't seen it.
He ignored the knight, and Magnus played bishop c6. Okay, and the reason is this queen is defending this, this, and this. And so you can't defend them all. So if you take this, which he didn't do, okay, I take this. Now, if you play queen takes, then I play rook takes b3, materials equal, I have the two bishops, this pawn's hanging with check, and the knight's hanging. So it's black's completely winning. It's like +4 for black, +5. Okay, so you have to take with the bishop. Okay, now the queen's defending both. So you play rook takes b3 again, and threatening the knight, and materials equal. And then if you take the rook, queen takes d4 check, wins the rook in the corner. Okay. And then when you win the rook in the corner, you're threatening this and this. And you have the two bishops and your pawn up. So +5 for black. Okay, so what this means is, after bishop c6, Fabi can't take the knight on f6. And so now if it's black's move, black can play knight e4, black can play knight d5, and black's doing great. Okay, and in this position, Fabi made a double question mark move. Now, what typically happens when you're a grandmaster, which I am, when your opponent makes a move you didn't see, and you realize that move is good. So Fabi didn't see bishop c6, I'm guessing, and then he was like, oh shit, that's a good move. Now you have to reconnoiter. You have to like chill out. Okay, you got to calm down. And you have to think forever and then play a good move. You got to think forever because things aren't so bad. And the only good moves are rook f1, which stops all of this rook takes rook nonsense. So we're actually threatening to take. Or rook c1, which attacks the bishop. After those moves, black is better but not winning. And instead, Fabi made a move that loses immediately. And then he's completely lost. And probably he was flustered about bishop c6, and he didn't calm himself down and think about the situation and play a good move. Okay, so he played bishop c2. This is double question mark, and the game's over. Okay, bishop is fantastic on this diagonal, and he's given up the diagonal. So what black plays queen d5, which was never a move because bishop was here. Now we're threatening mate. And also, if you defend with your queen, like queen e2, your d-pawn's hanging. So you don't want to do that. Also, queen d2 runs into bishop b4. skewering your queen and rook. So if you don't want to play here and you don't want to play here and you want to stop mate, that leaves one move.
You said if you don't want to play queen d2.
If you don't want to play this because of bishop here, you don't want to play this because of queen takes pawn check, and you want to stop mate.
Oh, rook e2.
Rook e2. That's what he played. And now black played a very simple move, which looks like there should be no problem for white, but there's a big problem for white. And Svidler and Howell were like, oh, he'll definitely find it. He's Magnus and so forth. He just played rook b4, threatening rook takes d4, and you can't stop rook takes d4. And everything collapses. So bishop c2 just loses immediately to this. The engine says black is more than +5. And the reason you can't take this is twofold. The simplest reason, if you want simple, the engine actually plays a little different, but there's more than one way to win. The simplest way is to trade rooks and then win that rook in the corner again. And then I'm up the exchange of a pawn and 2 bishops and your knight's on a3 and you're lower rated and your opponent's the world champion, so forth. Okay, so after rook b4, if I play rook takes d4, I'm just winning. And you can't stop rook takes d4. If you play rook d2, which looks like it stops rook takes d4, it doesn't. Because your rook is overworked. It's defending mate and here. So you can't take the rook as a mate. So after rook b4, the game's over. It's plus $1 million for black. Okay, so his f4 e5 didn't work out because he didn't see bishop c6. And after Magnus made the move he didn't see, he completely fell apart with bishop c2, just losing immediately. So not Fabi's best game. Close, though. Okay, he played king h2, which doesn't stop this. And then knight e4. And you can't let me take this bishop. And you can't let me play knight c3, forking your queen and rook. So you have to trade everything. And black has 2 bishops and an extra pawn. It's a passed pawn. And this knight is terrible. So he played knight c4, which improves his knight. And Svidler was wondering if Magnus would, if Fabi would resign. He's like, this is embarrassing to play. 2 bishops and an extra pawn. The black rook goes to the 7th rank. White has no counterplay. This game won't last long. Man, he was right. The game didn't last long. God damn. So he played rook b8 to play rook b2 later. Get his rook to the open file. Rook c1, which is also bad. Rook b5. This pawn's weak. I can pin your knight. I can attack your knight, then take this. e6. Takes, rook c5. So your bishop's attacked. And if you move your bishop to a random square, bishop here wins because you're pinned. Okay, so you have to play bishop f4, defending your rook.
Okay. I got it.
Okay.
I can't answer everything.
Then bishop d5. In this position, white has to move his knight. And then Svidler wanted to play rook takes rook, bishop b4, bishop a5, and rook takes a5 also wins. But he liked, this is the engine move, his knight here. This move wins, but Svidler liked this win better. And then bishop b4, and then bishop takes a5, and 2 bishops and 2 extra pawns.
Which does the engine like better?
It likes what Svidler said better. Yeah. So after bishop g5, Fabi resigned. And also, these are the best players in the world. So if you have such a position, you would never, ever, 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 ever think of resigning. If you do, that's not good. Don't resign. Okay, now he's obviously distraught because he got destroyed with white, and he's playing the best player in the world, and he's down 2 pawns for nothing, and the guy's 2 bishops. And the engine says this is +7. So they know when they're losing and they have no hope, but you guys don't know that. You guys might have no hope before the game starts, but you don't know it. Okay, I don't mean in chess, I just mean in life in general. So you got to play out till mate because your opponent doesn't have the acumen that Magnus Carlsen has. Now, I remember specifically when I played Magnus Carlsen, many people, at least a dozen, over the next week or two, ask me why I resigned in the position I resigned in. Okay, and in that position, I was losing a piece. So I would have been down a piece in an endgame. Which against you guys, I would win, 90% of the time. But against Magnus, that's not good. If you want some chess advice, take it to the bank, okay? Don't be down a piece in an endgame against Magnus. Don't do that. That's bad for your chess.
So, I don't know how to say your name. Blase or Blaze?
Either way.
All right, Blase had a question, and I was wondering the same thing, which was, what was Fabi trying to do with the bishop c2 move?
Well, it's clear to me, whether it's true or not, Fabi says, I'm attacking the knight.
Right.
And I want to play queen d3 and so forth. And the rook was on my bishop, so my queen's not tied down here. And you remember, after pawn takes knight, rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, the reason that worked is black played rook takes bishop, and then queen takes d4 check. So that means in this position, he's threatening pawn takes knight. So he probably thought the knight might move, and then I'll play queen d3, threatening mate, and then my pieces aren't attacked so much. I have a nice center. And I'm sure he saw this and then just didn't see rook b4. Because rook b4 is an odd move, but it just, there's no defense to rook d4, which is weird. It's strange there's no defense to that. And black's position is winning in any case, but not as winning. Like rook b d8 is good. So I think Fabi had a meltdown after bishop c6, because he probably felt he was better here. Then after this, realized he was worse, and then he didn't calm himself down quickly enough and continued to make mistakes. So it was a bad day at the office. Magnus played, Magnus basically played perfectly. So when somebody plays perfectly and somebody's not playing their best game, then you lose. So forth. What about queen d3 instead of bishop c3? Do you mean bishop c2? Would you have found bishop c6? I wouldn't find anything.
So let's see, almost 7:20. I'm still good. Be down here.
All right, hopefully somebody did a marker for that. If not, you're all banned.
Tensor Extension did, I saw.
Yeah, he's good at that. Okay, now we'll look at another game.